Hinterland Education Development, Technical and Vocational Training, Literacy Enhancement. Education is on the move. On Education Spotlight, we look at developments within the education sector and how Guyanese can take advantage of the opportunities available.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Education Spotlight. This week we're going to be focusing on the Regional SEN Unit, and with me is Keon Chung. Hi Keon, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let's jump right into it and tell us all about the Regional SEN Center.
Okay, great. The Regional Special Education Needs Diagnostic and Treatment Center would have come to Guyana as a result of a CARICOM Heads of Government Summit, whereby Cuba would have put forward a number of initiatives to strengthen the program of cooperation among itself and the other CARICOM member states, and Guyana would have inherited this here. The purpose of the center, though it's housed in Guyana, is supposed to be regional in terms of the CARICOM member states, is intended to provide the countries with a unified position to identifying, treating, and preventing disabilities across the region. And the way that they would have articulated for this to be done is via a multidisciplinary approach. So here at the center, we have persons from Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education here coming together to provide this comprehensive evaluation to persons. The departments here would be speech therapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, psychology, the social work. And we would have added two other departments based on what we would have found, and those two departments would be behavioral therapy and stimulation.
So a lot of people aren't aware of the many services that are offered here, and you would have just mentioned some of the departments that are housed here. Can you tell us how persons can go about accessing the treatments here, the services here?
Absolutely. So the access to the center can come in about three ways. I can narrow it down. And one way can be via walk-ins, and persons walk in and they say, okay, I've identified this challenge either with myself or with my child, and we take the contact information and then we put them on a schedule for them to be accessing the services. Another one would be referrals, and referrals can come from two places. One, from private organizations. We've got from the doctors, pediatricians more so. We've had from the Georgetown Public Hospital, we've had from the health centers, we had from NGOs, particularly Blossom Incorporated, and then we have from the school system. The school system would come via the regions where we have SEN officers. They would identify, okay, the teachers or the head teachers have been saying that we've got these children with challenges at our schools, and as such, they would like for them to be screened, and we take it like that. What I want to say at this point in time on the accessing the services of the center is that we do have a backlog indeed, and that is as a result of shortage of staff. So we were forced to end interviews for 2022 in August, because at August I had 80 persons waiting to come in. I don't have to tell you by now how much that has increased by. So anyone looking to access the services of the center right now will be given the date anytime after February of 2023.
Okay, so I'm glad that you mentioned the schools aspect of it. Now let's talk teachers. How are we getting our teachers to identify disabilities within our students so that they can access the services?
Today, teachers, for those who've been engaged in doing ongoing assessments and really observing the children and monitoring their progress, have been able to identify, okay, and recommend or suggest that, you know, this child is not performing at grade level, and so he or she should be screened. But more structured than that is a screening packet that the Ministry of Education is going to be launched, that is going to be launching soon, sometime in the new year, where teachers would be trained how to use this screening packet. So now we'd have an instrument to really guide them. So while it is that they themselves can see that this child is presenting challenges, there is an aspect of it that we call response to intervention. And response to intervention is whereby you identify struggling learners, and not just identify them and say, hey, Keon is struggling, but you identify them and you put something in place. I think if I remember correctly, they need to put at least 2 evidence-based strategies in place. And should these 2 evidence-based strategies fail, then they refer them out. Because sometimes, more times than often, it can be attributed to a lack of adequate instruction, or some peripheral situation is hindering the child. The child is hungry, the child is coming from an abused environment, the child isn't getting enough rest. All these are factors that can affect them learning. So if we were to really tease through the document, we'd see, okay, academically he can work, but there's something else affecting him or her. So let's see about that, and they can engage the welfare schools department and see what they can do there.
And this is already in place?
The screening packet, not just yet. No.
Okay, so that would be a part of the screening
Yes,
package
yes.
that will be launched
Yes.
next year?
Yes. Response intervention is a multi-tiered approach. There are 3 tiers. Tier 1 deals with universal screening, and Tier 2 deals with evidence-based teaching practices with Tier 1 too. So there's where you do large group, small group, individual teaching. Should the individual not be successful in Tier 1 and Tier 2, then this is where the center comes in at Tier 3, and we do the comprehensive evaluation, and that informs eligibility.
So earlier you had mentioned that there, like, an adult or children can access the services here, but we're focused more on the children's aspect of it right now.
Correct.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about how it has been working with the kids to help them with whatever disability that they may have?
But what we do is we only do the assessment part of it. So the individual would come in via the interview, and then we'd see if based on the interview, we'd know whether the individual needs to be referred out. Sometimes it's mentioned somewhere in the interview process that he has runny eyes or she complains of headaches, and so we'd send them to see an optician or to have a CT scan or something, and to rule out any physiological challenges. If none of those are there, then we go through the assessment process. The individual will come for the assessment for a minimum of 2 times, but a maximum as many times needed, because if the attention span is short, then we need to discontinue it. If the child says they're tired or hungry, then we need to discontinue it, and so they come as many times as needed. Once that assessment process is finished, then we have the report. The report is then given to the parent, and then we do what we call an individual education plan. Here's where we bring the parent, we bring the school teacher, we bring the SEN officer if one is there, and we all sit down and we talk about what it is we found with Keon. Keon has intellectual disability and is a mild intellectual disability. We're going to talk about placement for Keon, we're going to talk about academic goals for Keon, and the individual education plan has a life of, we give it a life of about 6 months at this point in time. So we'll be able to check in to see how he's going. And so once we've identified those goals and everybody's signing to them, parents need to know that they're part of the process, and I need to support the teacher. The teacher needs to know that they need to support them. But also at the same time recognizing that the individual education plan isn't set in stone. So if while doing it you see that Keon isn't coming to school, then the teacher needs to say, well, these goals aren't going to be achieved because Keon isn't coming to school. Similarly, Keon's parent can say, well, Keon's teacher has taken leave because of some reason, and so what's going to happen to the goals? So that informs, so we know what's happening with the goals. And this goes through in that line. At the ending of the year, what we do here is that we would give a tally of the overall number of persons that would have been assessed and the most prevalent category of disability. This information is what goes to the SEN unit at NSERD, since they have a mandate on training. And so they will roll out, or they should roll out their training based on what we have found here and how we can best support them there.
Okay, so before we go, what can we expect from the center going forward? I know you would have mentioned the screening package. Is there anything else we can expect?
The screening, the assessment will continue. More outreach, but all of that is dependent on staffing. Because if we have more staff, then, because when we go out to the regions, it means that the work here, like in next week, we're going to be in Region 9. So it means that nothing is going to really be happening here, but we're going to be out there. So if we have enough staff, then work can continue here while it's also going on out there. Going forward, what we're going to be having, though, we're going to be having construction is going on for sensory rooms. So we're going to have the first ever sensory room here. And we're also going to be having a pool that's going to be donated. So we'll be able to offer aquatic therapy to students with disabilities there too. We should be having a behavioral specialist on board. And so, because this is one of the challenging areas here, a lot of kiddos have been coming with behavioral issues, and this affects the assessment process, because if you're not settling or sitting long enough for us to do the assessment, then it doesn't happen. So we need to do the behavioral intervention first and then bring the child back to see if it was just a behavioral intervention or was it a learning something. So in terms of going forward, you can see aquatic therapy being offered, stimulation in the sensory room, behavioral therapy being offered, yes.
Thank you so much, Keon. This has been Education Spotlight. Thank you for watching, and remember to join us again next week for another edition. Goodbye!